Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime as always, Vasili Gianarakos, my friend. How are you?
Doing really well, Yariv. Can't complain. Hump day for all our listeners, so we're finally there. But just from a Flyers perspective, obviously they go 3 for 3 on their road trip. They've won 4 in a row, 5 of their last 6. So there's a lot to talk about, and more of a positive spin versus the last couple of times we talked, where they kind of were on a bit of a slide here. And we have a really great guest, so it's going to be a super fun episode. How you doing, Yariv?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I'm doing well. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, and somebody who's been on the podcast a few times already, he should need zero introduction. Writer for NHL.com for the Flyers, Hockey Buzz, so on. Bill Meltzer, welcome back to the show.
How you doing, guys? Always a pleasure talking with the two of you.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to having you. We gave the audience the heads up that you were coming, and we're excited. We're excited to get your feedback on a lot of the stuff that happened and on this podcast in particular. So let me, before we get started, let me just do the typical shout out here. Just remind everybody to please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell for notifications. Go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow there, and if you give us a rating on iTunes, that'd be super helpful. And also shout out to our sponsors. Multiple sponsors, Jim Steaks on 4th and South, and also Summit Public Adjusters as well. I have been realizing that I have not mentioned them again. Should have been mentioning them all this time, so shout out to them as well. I do have their number here, which I forgot to pull up as well, because that's professional. 215-752-0560. Reach out to them for anything. Okay. Let's get into it. We have a good amount of topics today. I want to just start off right with the topical one. One we were hoping to have you on. Obviously, we told people that unfortunately you were not available due to a power outage. So definitely want your feedback right on this. So just to remind everybody, in case anybody somehow forgot, the Philadelphia Flyers were involved in a very I would say epic trade to some degree, but a very large trade, maybe one of the largest trades we've had, at least from a news point, since maybe the Chris Pronger trade, where the Flyers moved Cutter Gauthier in return for Jamie Drysdale and a 2025 second-round pick, and that trade was involving the Ducks. Bill, we'll get into some specifics with the team and stuff with Gauthier, but just your immediate thoughts when you saw the trade, now that you had some time to digest, kind of how did you take that? And what did you think about some of the reasoning that you heard from Cutter, or lack thereof, that clarity, over the past few days? Has anything changed for you? Have you maybe gained some new perspective? Maybe something we haven't heard as far as reasoning, maybe just how we got to this point of getting Jamie Drysdale. And then I want your thoughts on Drysdale as well. And we'll do that next.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. I didn't just take a step back to last Monday. The Flyers are playing the Penguins in a marquee game. Flyers are coming off of a pretty big win the game before, one of the best games they'd played in a while. Big rivalry game. It's early in the first period. I'm sitting next to Jason Martinez in the press box. And, we see it come across social, the trade. First in the Anaheim Twitter /X/ whatever it's called this week. My first is, well, wait a minute. Let's be sure this is a real report. Whenever you see a report of that kind of nature, you have to be sure. It was not in our email accounts yet or whatever. So wait a couple minutes, then the email came from the Flyers, the verifying the trade was real, that Danny Briere would be talking after the first period. And the funny thing is that as marquee of a game as it was against the Penguins that night, all the rest of us up in the press box we were basically unplugged from the game the rest of the night. Now, I'm covering the game for the Flyers site, for PhiladelphiaFlyers.com. So I always do a post-game 5 report, whatever. Kind of quickly game planned. Okay, I'll cover this game, and then I'll switch gears and do the Gauthier stuff. But you spend the rest of the night catching up because Danny was talking at the first intermission. And even in following the game, I go back, I was like, I can at least see that at every stoppage, whatever, because a lot of times when you're covering a game, when you're watching it from the press box, you really need to see some of the replays and stuff because things happen so fast down the ice. Was a puck tipped? Was it this? Did this or that happen? And at least I can see some gaps in there where in watching replays afterwards, things aren't quite as described. That's why so it's it was not the best game report that I ever wrote in my life. But anyway, so first period ends. Danny comes out from the executive offices, and I was actually surprised at the amount of candor and openness and transparency that he presented right off of it. That Cutter did not intend on signing here. And he walked us through the timeline of how it happened. And I'm immediately wondering, I consider myself I'm a contractor with the organization, but I can, I'm not a 365-day a year employee, but I consider myself was pretty plugged in. Knew nothing of it. It was kept totally a secret. So it was truly the people that most needed to know about it. It was, that a lot of credit goes there. And mind you, they're talking to teams. So, one of the things that Danny did was he actually gave a thank you to the teams they talked to for being silent about it.
Right.
So, as I started hearing it, okay, this makes sense. I'd always liked Drysdale quite a bit as a prospect. And so my immediate thoughts in there is, okay, the Flyers took a horrible situation and they made a hockey trade out of it. So, Drysdale's still, is a young defenseman, super high up. So we'll get into Drysdale a little bit more. But basically, I'm thinking, okay, so as you're doing this rebuild here, you are not going to have Gauthier, and that was a big part of the plan up front. But now you've just had a big piece on defense. And one of the big things that the Flyers had wanted to do, of course, was build the blue line. And when the Flyers hired Bob Murray, I'm not revealing anything, secretive here. Well, when I talked to some people in the front office about hiring Bob Murray, they said, yeah, Bob was very good at drafting and developing defensemen. And of course, he was the one who drafted Drysdale. So the reason why I asked Danny the question during the press conference was, what influence did Bob Murray have? And he confirmed that was one of the voices who had a pretty strong voice in how all this went down. So it's hard to make sense. The other thing Danny said during the press conference that immediately made my ears perk up is not once, but twice, he called Gauthier a winger. And
I noticed.
Yeah, and when the Flyers drafted him, I got mixed feelings within the organization. Some said, "Oh, he'll be a great first-line center. He's going to play center at BC. We think he's going to be a center." And I have to be truthful. I've always seen him as a winger. I've always seen him better as a left winger than as a center. But it was never a question of is there a spot for or a role for him, because when a player has that much offensive upside, whether it's center or wing, there's a spot for it, but then you work, you fit pieces around that. So whether it was center or wing, but I thought, okay, well, so they really didn't see him as good as the guy who was going to be the first line center, probably first line left winger. And then it became clearer and clearer as to just how totally not in communication the two sides were. That Gauthier had cut off all communication. And then it came out the next day that he wouldn't even meet with John LeClaire and Patrick Sharp.
Crazy.
And I consider that such bad form because
well said. Bad form is perfect term for it.
It is, because and you never know if you're going to end up in the same organization with somebody in some future time. So to disrespect two guys who are the stature of those two, right? Guys who've been NHL All-Stars, guys who have Stanley Cup rings, right? By comparison, at least at this stage of his career, who's Cutter Gauthier, right? He didn't come off sounding very well about all of that, So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's almost like Cutter ended up being the personality that everybody rumored Michkov to be.
Yeah,
in some kind of way. right?
Yeah, no, for sure, and that struck me too, because last year leading in the draft, all you heard about, Michkov having an ego and an attitude and whatever, and um, and at least so far he hasn't really shown that. Maybe maybe a lot of pride, but I haven't seen that arrogance or uncoachability or lack of work ethic or any other things. One thing, watching a lot of KHL games, streams this year, and pretty much, unless it was a game for Kolosov, it's pretty much specifically to watch Michkov. He works hard on the ice. He competes. He's a much better playmaker than I ever thought he was. I mean, so. But yeah, obviously there's, if you have Gauthier, there's room for both. But so the Flyers kind of had to make a decision, and I think Keith Jones hit it on the head by saying his maximum value is right now, right? Coming off of being chosen best forward of the World Juniors, winning a gold medal. It's not common knowledge around the league he's not coming here. And so again, so they made a hockey trade out of it, and especially in light of what it could have been. I mean, the Flyers would have had, I wouldn't even call it leverage, but they had the option of continuing to wait, because they could have made Gauthier wait until August 15th of 2016, right? Then go all the way through college and say, well, you're going to sign here, you're going to sit and you're going to wait till 2.5 years. Injuries can happen, whatever. Yeah, I'm just glad they cut bait when they did, because it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. So, so in terms of getting that done, we'll see. I think that when you weigh all the factors that went into it, I think that they made as good of a move as they possibly could. And then in a little bit we'll get into talk about Drysdale here too. But they got a pretty darn good young defenseman out of it too. So
I want to ask you something, Vasili. If you have a question, go in right after this question.
Yeah, sure.
But I have a kind of a theory that with the inflated value, like we know how much teams cover defensemen in general, right? Most teams are not trying to move a potential, let's call him number one defenseman, right-handed, top 10 pick, top 6, whatever pick. A lot of times these guys are just not available. And there's a rumor that came out that the Flyers were pushing for Bowen Byram, right? Who would have also been an awesome return for Cutter Gauthier, right? Everybody be over the moon to have him. I have kind of a theory that with the spike in value because of the publicity, the strong tournament, he had a strong tournament before that too, that maybe Drysdale wasn't really available until somewhat recently, where Anaheim was kind of saying, you know what? Let's go for it. The Flyers might have asked for Drysdale at some point, and maybe they were reticent. And then, as their other defensemen were doing well, he had a contract dispute.
Yeah.
Maybe it was kind of like, you know what? Let's pull the trigger on it. And the Flyers went, we got what we wanted, right? And then they got the extra second because there are 10 teams probably competing for Gauthier. So you can get additional value there. I don't think it was so much. I do want to talk about Frank Cervalli comment too, but what do you think about that theory? Do you think there's any ground to that theory that maybe Drysdale wasn't even available till somewhat recently?
I think there's absolutely validity to that. They didn't draft him 6 overall with an intention of dealing him a couple of years later, and the pandemic had something to do with this too. And but I mean he was in the NHL at 18.
I know,
which is really hard on a defenseman.
They rushed him.
They rushed him. There wasn't an OHL season that year. He would have been better off though spending that whole year in the American League, because because there was that exception. There was no OHL season that year, so the best place for him would have been the American League. He's a little in over his head as an 18-year-old in the NHL, as almost every defenseman would be. And then he took steps each year, and then last year he missed almost the whole season due to injury. This year he had the contract hold and another injury, the lower body injury that kept him out a while. So, he missed a lot of time. Not fatal. It was a kind of a lost year for him. He lost a year of development, which is still young enough to recover from. He's still only 21, but I do think it went from untouchable to available in the right trade. and that's when those guys become available anyway, because otherwise you can't get them,
Right.
as you said. So in terms of the value that you brought back, the upside, the trade value, the trade capital, particularly if you view Gauthier as a winger, fairly or unfairly, the way that NHL teams tend to assess best player, best available player, is typically centers and defensemen get higher priority than wingers. Now there's exceptions, right? But generally speaking, defensemen, particularly right-handed shooting defensemen, and most especially right-handed defensemen who can skate, or A+ kind of skaters, which Drysdale absolutely is. I mean, Flyers have some mobile defensemen, but he's instantly their most mobile defenseman. I mean, he's has elite skating ability. So so he became available, and who's to say that if you waited it out this year, and even if everything stayed quiet, who's to say that maybe Drysdale would be available this offseason if he had a good rest of the season too?
Right.
So I think the time was right.
Yeah. So, do you have something to ask? Otherwise,
Yeah,
go ahead, please.
definitely. Just for the trade in general, I think it was necessary at the time that it happened, right? Like, if you wait any longer, if you're the Flyers, the chance of potentially losing leverage down the line isn't worth it, and then recouping that same value that you might have with Drysdale might have not been there. The way I really see it is just you essentially are filling and moving one need for another, right? So you had Gauthier, who projected to be maybe a first line center. They're phrasing it as a winger now, which makes a lot of sense. He's no longer in the organization, for a guy in Drysdale who could potentially be, a top defenseman, right-handed shooting. Those are, really valuable commodities in the NHL. So ultimately, I think if you look at it from a value perspective, the Flyers end up trading, a forward for a potential top pair defenseman here. I think value-wise, if you look at those two positions, it's always way, historically, it's a lot harder to develop and draft, and find that top pair guy versus finding your top line forward. So I think if you look at it that way, you're almost shifting the needs, like I was saying, right? From center to what it was previously, which was defense. So I think now that's the Flyers' main focus, essentially, right? Is looking to try to fill that need in terms of a center, in terms of a forward. But I think it could be an easier pathway for them, right? Because the defense is always harder to find that top guy that can give you those minutes, that can skate like a Drysdale does. I don't think there's many defensemen in the NHL right now, if you look at skating, aside from a, Cale Makar or defensemen of those types of nature that really have and possess that type of skating ability. So just looking at that, it's great. And then you have two known coaches in Shaw and Tortorella, who in the past have worked with defensemen like a Werenski, very similar playing style. And you've kind of seen where his game has gone after being under their tutelage. So I think it's, a really exciting thing for the Flyers to have those two working with him. So.
Oh, 100%. And that we brought that up on the front end, kind of, in terms of priorities in the rebuild positionally. And you did, you shifted it. One of the things with developing defensemen is, you can even look at guys that have gone on to be, Norris Trophy winning or caliber defensemen. There's almost always growing pains those first few years. Even a guy like Victor Hedman had a couple rough years at the very beginning.
I bring it up all the time.
The thing is with Drysdale is a lot of the growing pains were spent in Anaheim. And now hopefully he's coming out on the other side of that, understanding what works for him, what doesn't work for him, and again, he's making up for a little bit of lost time, but it's time he can recoup at the NHL level. I like how specifically they've said, listen, we want you to focus on getting up ice, attacking, and we'll teach you defense. We know there are going to be adjustments from playing, from playing man-to-man to playing zone. There's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be probably some bad mistakes or ugly games along the way as you're adjusting. Smart player, though, so he'll make the adjustment, but there will be an adjustment period. But a lot of those initial growing pains of being a little overwhelmed by the NHL or playing against some guys who, just a couple of years ago you're watching on TV, or not really understanding NHL systems and schemes, and just in terms of what's expected of you. You know, a lot of times young players want to be very safe, right? They told him what they want from him. What his expectations are. I mean, unfortunately, right now he's dealing with an illness, so hopefully he's back by Thursday, but shouldn't be too long. But in terms of getting through some of that initial developmental stuff, he's already got some of that under his belt, a lot of it under his belt, and he's still just 21 years old.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, Bill. I was mentioning to Yariv last week on the show that with the trade, you almost take away a sense of development period by moving on from Gauthier, right? Because he is going to struggle as well as any young player would. He's not going to come into the league and automatically, be this 40 goal type of scorer. We've projected in the past, right? Like if even he was to come in a rookie season and get 50 points, that's like a best case scenario for a young winger making his debut in the NHL. So with Drysdale already playing a couple of seasons with Anaheim and kind of going through those growing pains, like you stated, it's almost like you avoid that and having to go through that with a Gauthier because you acquired a guy in Drysdale who already has more experience under his belt. So it definitely people were saying online that, oh, does this slow down the rebuild? If anything, I think it kind of might speed it up in a sense that you don't have to go through as many growing pains with Drysdale versus potentially a Gauthier. And just to preface it too, right? Like these guys are still very, very young in their NHL careers. There's no guarantee either of them are going to be top line forwards or, top level defensemen at this point. I think that's what the hope is for Anaheim and Philadelphia, but it's a wait and see ultimately for both teams, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And actually, let me follow up before I get back to the Gauthier thing, because I do have one more comment on that. When it comes to Drysdale, I look at the situation he came from in Anaheim, and they have not been successful for a while. And it's not just that they've been unsuccessful. They've been horrific defensively, specifically.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of best practices did that kid learn over the past few years? And again, I'm not jumping on their coach. I'm not going to jump on any of them that he had, over that time. But was he even in an ideal place for a defenseman to come in at 18 years old and start playing top pair minutes where the team around him isn't playing? Like I think he was a minus 26 his first year where he put up points. It's like, I don't know if we
situation for a young
guy.
well,
I don't know if we could take any of those statistics really that seriously just because of the situation he was in. But you kind of agree with that, Bill?
I totally agree with that. I think that it's the ultra rare situation where I think any young defenseman is ready.
What happened to McCarr in that situation? Would he have done 100 points or whatever, say 80 points? I don't know. At 18?
I don't know. I think McCarr is, and McCarr, talk about being the exception. Remember, he came from junior A too.
Yeah.
He didn't even play major
he
junior.
Is an exception.
He's just the unicorn, right? But but in most cases, I said even a guy like Victor Hedman needed time.
Roman
you look at Rasmus Dahlin's first couple of years in Buffalo. Those hits, he had a couple of rough years to start with. It's just so hard to come in, and you hope the guy works through it. Now Rasmus Ristolainen has found another role, a different identity. But the worst thing that Buffalo ever did to him was sticking him in the NHL at 18 and giving him 22 minutes a night and saying, "Go get him, kid," because that really held him back. Really
tread water, right? Like when you are a young defenseman and you enter the NHL like that at a young age, like the ability to defend in the NHL is probably the hardest position. Any coach, anybody would tell you that. So to put a young player on a bad team in that situation, I think it's almost a recipe for disaster. Like, how often do you see a first round pick get drafted and then immediately make the jump to the NHL? I think it's incredibly rare. Usually all of them would have at least one season at the minimum in the AHL, right? So
yeah, or at least a draft plus 1 year in juniors, right. An additional collegiate year, and anything so they can get a little bit physically stronger, or tested against some international competition, a little higher level. Just it just tends to be a prudent and intelligent way to develop guys. Just because you're needy at the NHL level and you're physically mature, that was the case with the rest of the line, was already physically mature. It doesn't mean your game is mature yet,
Right.
and you can it can ruin a player's development, and if you're not careful about it. That's what I'm saying with a little bit of Drysdale. I think he was coming through that a little bit. Even as Anaheim was kind of still not very good and continuing to struggle, I could see a development path with him where he was getting better, and then the injuries happened. But so it's really just it's still a work in progress, but it's one with a lot of upside to it.
Yeah. So the comment I had, and this is one thing that actually really frustrated me about the trade, it wasn't even so much the trade. Some of it was more just the reactions. And I really like Frank Cervalli. I know Vasili likes Frank Cervalli. We had nothing against the guy at all, but I'm just using him as an example because I was listening to his podcast. But this is something I heard in other outlets as well, is that when Gauthier was traded, there seemed to be this like perception. One, I heard him called the best prospect in the Flyers system, which we know is not true. And then I specifically heard Frank Cervalli call him a franchise caliber player who is going to score 50 goals a year. Look, it's possible that Gauthier might put up 50 goals in a season. He's not doing that by himself. He's doing that because he's going to be playing with an elite playmaker of some sort, and that's potentially there. But I noticed this like inflation of his value as if the Flyers lost like a franchise caliber center or a player. And Vasili and I both said it. He said it earlier, right? The 50 point. When we've been talking about it, we said, hey, he's going to come in here. If he can put up even 20 goals, like 20 goals, maybe 25 assists, 45, 50 points. That's how we kind of see it.
That'd be a great rookie year.
Yeah, if you look at majority of players, the players that come in a rookie year and score 50 points, that you're on your way to being an all-star. If you can hit anywhere between 60 and 80, you're in that upper echelon. The McKinnons, the McCarrs, McDavid's obviously kind of a freak of nature, but Bedard is up there. Like these are guys who can get close to a point a game coming into the NHL. That's pretty rare. That's like your upper echelon best players in the world. And I never saw Gauthier that way. Did you notice an inflation? Because it kind of drove me nuts. And I think it's what skewed this trade to some of the fans to thinking that this was like, like not an equal trade because the Flyers got a second, so we got a lesser prospect. But you mentioned it earlier. I really don't see that at all. I see that it was pretty much even, and the Flyers got the extra second. And potentially the Flyers might have won this all around, depending on how development goes. Even if things go great for both sides,
for sure, and I'll preface it by saying that Gauthier is a very, very good prospect.
Yes,
has a tremendous shot, big and strong. I think he's going to be an NHL impact player. Yeah, as he develops. If he doesn't, it would surprise me. It would also surprise me though if he's a franchise player. I don't see that. And that's even beyond working the fact that he's not very good without the puck, right? Especially, in Anaheim, he pretty much has to play wing because he's not going to play over McTavish and he's not going to play over Carlson. So he's either going to play a wing in the top six or he's going to be a third line center for them, which is going to further reduce the amount of goals you can score. You're just not going to have as many minutes. But putting all that aside, where I see his ceiling as, and this is a very good hockey player. This is not it's not an insult to be compared to Max Pacioretty, but that's the kind of level I see of him. Much better than average player, a guy who on the right team, surrounded by good teammates, could be an important piece on a winning team. But no, he's not your centerpiece. The guy that is your main piece that you build around. He's a piece that you build around, part of a nucleus, part of a supporting cast. But he's never going to be, I think, the main piece. He wasn't the main piece on the U.S. national team, the under-18 team. There's a ton of upside there, but no, I think that's a little bit of an oversell to call him a franchise kind of player.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So in the early stages, we haven't seen too much because he is sick. And you did speak on his ceiling already, but Jamie Drysdale, what have you seen so far in those 2 games? Is he living up to the hype for you already? Just what I've seen, because I'll just tell you, and Vasili, you can also comment when Bill is done. from what I've seen, the skating is something I have not seen in a Flyers uniform. I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
I literally can't remember the last time I saw a Flyers defenseman who could skate like that with that level of pedigree, with the vision. I mean, he already made some passes, and not just the one he got the assists on, right? Like he made that ridiculous breakout pass in the overtime, and he's not even comfortable. He doesn't even know the system, and it's just coming in already. He looks like an upper echelon prospect to me, and I still call him a prospect because you look at York. He was coming in at 20, 21,
Yeah.
right? He's a little bit older, so I see him as this looks to be something pretty special. And if we can get another guy even on the level of like Eric Desjardins, right? It was really the last time we had like a savvy defenseman that wasn't like Chris Pronger, maybe Timonen, who's like an upper echelon league guy. How do you kind of view his early showing, and do you think he has still a good chance to hit that ceiling? Do you see that developing under Torts, like Vasili was mentioning?
I think he has a real good fighting chance of doing that. His skating was absolutely as advertised. I love watching him during the 3-on-3.
Yeah,
because he's just, I mean, he's just he was born with skates on his feet. The way he can walk the blue line, the way he can just accelerate at the drop of a hat, right? The way he can change directions, the way he can, I mean, it just his skating is unbelievably good, and really really clever passer too. The assist on the Frost goal, in the power play goal in the game against Calgary. It wasn't a fancy play, but this is a play where he walks the blue line. So he's on the left side of the blue line, and the defense is on the left. So he goes to the right, and the PKers start to follow him over. Now all of a sudden, Frost is open on the left, and he not only did he get the Frost, but he puts it in a spot where he can step into the puck directly, and then he got a great shot off. But that was on the Flyers. I don't know the last time the Flyers had a guy like that. I don't know if you have to go back to Mark Howe even. I mean, that's I'm not saying he's going to be Mark Howe, right? But I'm just saying there's a really high skill level to this player, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him develop. Defensively, he has a very quick stick that stands out right away too. So some stuff to learn about coverage, which is it's all normal. I mean, defense wise, he's not as far ahead as he is as a puck mover and in terms of a distributor. But again, all the pieces are there to keep building off of. So I think that it's going to be a really exciting thing. Now all of a sudden, as you're talking about your prospects in the system, now maybe Oliver Bonk, who's fit I see eventually as a second pairing kind of defenseman. I still don't think he's going to be a scorer necessarily as an NHL guy, but a pretty good all around guy with some shutdown ability. That second pair is perfect for him, right? And so maybe you have Drysdale as your future top pair right side guy. You go down a pairing for Bonk, and all of a sudden, I think your guys are situated, if they develop as you hope, the way you want them to, and that's that's at least the hope. But I think that the potential to do that is absolutely there.
Yeah, me too. Vasili, anything to add?
Yeah, Drysdale obviously hasn't gotten to play the last two, but in the first two, I mean, it's a small viewing, but I mean, he looks really comfortable out there on a team that he's not really familiar with, which is, I think that just shows his IQ in general, right? Like he seems like a very smart player to me on the ice. Even the play you mentioned for Frost goal, Bill, where he's kind of making that little shimmy on the blue line and moving laterally there to kind of draw people into him to open Frost up. So it just shows, I mean, the smarts there. Obviously his edges, his skating, unbelievable. What really stands out for me is in that Montreal game where, even though he gives the puck up to the Montreal player and they, streak down for a breakaway, he's able to keep up with him and keep up with them and kind of break the play up. And that even shows, right, just even more of the skating ability. The defense obviously is the thing to work on, but I think he's so young that there's just so much room for improvement. And I don't think he's ever going to be like your shutdown type guy. I don't think that's ever going to be his strength. But it's great that, Tortorella and Shaw are going to allow him to kind of be that rover similar to a Zach Werenski, because for these young guys, why not play to their strengths versus, try to turn him into something that he's not. So
Exactly.
that's a really great thing. But it'll be interesting to see how the defense kind of progresses if he can turn into that overall top pair type of defenseman down the line.
Yeah. I think we all have high hopes for the kid. I can't wait to see him play more. All right, let's get into more Flyers focused stuff. So right now, Flyers are on a pretty good streak right now, and they had a pretty impressive road trip here. An overtime win against Minnesota, 4-3, 2-0 shutout against Winnipeg, which was the hottest team in the NHL. Nobody was beating them of late. And then another pretty successful win against St. Louis, a hard-fought win, but a game where I felt that they were in control the entire time. And a team that looks like they are in control of their own destiny here. And that puts them at second place in the division, again, temporarily, but they do have a nice little cushion, at least more than they've had in the past. They have to continue it if they want to stay. It's obviously a fragile lead, especially in such a tough division. But Bill, what are your thoughts about the Flyers' current streak, where they're at, about this road trip? And I'll kind of move this topic up and add it. And do you think this adds into their identity as to who they are? And do you think it's even changed from where it's been earlier in the season?
Yeah, well, with the caveat, as you said, that things change quickly
Yeah.
in the NHL. All of a sudden, remember how quickly the narrative shifted from the Flyers' unbeaten streak. I'm talking about before this current run to winless in X number of games. They had a couple of overtime shootout losses. Then all of a sudden, it's been 4 games since they've won. So I mean that just shows you how fast things can and often do change.
Sure.
And Flyers have, again, as a caveat before we get into the excitement, the 2 really tough games coming up: Dallas and Colorado. And, in Philly, where the Flyers have been better on the road than at home so far, but 2 really high-end opponents, cup contenders coming in, and Flyers have to keep doing the things that they've been doing. The game. I mean, on this road trip, and being truthful, going into the Winnipeg game, oh boy, this is going to be a really tough one to win. Not only with the Flyers, especially once we learned that Couturier and Drysdale were both out for the game, but also they'd won 8 in a row. They had a 14-game point streak, 12-0-2 over that 14-game stretch. I mean, they were missing some key guys too, but the Flyers were in the same boat with that, so that wasn't really an advantage going in. Flyers were playing second game of a back-to-back, their third game in 4 nights, their fourth game in 6 nights, and Winnipeg had been home all week without any back-to-backs. So they had but sometimes there's that fatigue factor. And how do you win a game like that, right? A, you have to play from ahead, because if you're chasing the game, forget it. It's not going to happen. Even if you can come back a little bit, you're going to run out of gas by the third period. Flyers did that. They grabbed a lead. They actually outchanced Winnipeg for, I would say, about the first 36, 37 minutes of the game. Winnipeg had a little push at the end of the second period. Took a power play into the third period, which the Flyers killed off. And then the goalie took over. And Urson was dominating in that third period, and Urson helped close out the rest of that. And in a game where you only dressed 3 centers, 11 forwards, but only 3 centers, they needed all 3 centers to step up in the absence of Couturier. They needed Frost to create and use his speed. They needed Lawton to do a lot of shutdown work. He played 24 minutes in that game, right? And they needed Paling to win faceoffs, to grind, to win battles, use his speed. And that almost as much as Urson, all 3 centers turned in one heck of a game on Saturday. All 3 of them made a positive impact. So that 2-0 win, and obviously huge for Atkinson to finally get 2 goals after the 26-game drought. Another power play goal in the mix. I mean, all positives, right? You go into St. Louis, and it's almost the same scenario. They do get Cates back in that game, and so at least you have a full complement of centers for that game. Ultimately, I'd still like to see Noah move back to a wing when Couturier is back. I really think his best position, doesn't mean he's not a good center, but I think he makes the most impact as a winger because of his forechecking ability, and it's something the Flyers really can use in that lineup. Whereas I think there's a little bit of redundancy with the centers between Paling and Lawton and Cates when they're all in the lineup, kind of defensive guys. Different games, different some different abilities, but basically the same kind of a role. But in that game, once again, all of your centers stepped up, right? Cates didn't get a point, but I thought he had a heck of a game in his first game. He hadn't played since right after Thanksgiving. It looks like he hadn't skipped a beat. He had a really strong game. The Flyers' fourth line, let's be honest, has been getting the brains bashed in, caved game after game after game through much of December, where it was really you just hold your breath. They weren't scored on. Cates came back, and not only were they scored on, they were up the ice a lot too. They were forechecking a lot, and Cates had a lot to do with that. So that he didn't get in the score sheet, but he made an impact, and certainly helped them to distribute the minutes. Lawton scored a goal. Those have been hard for him to come by, but also what he does situationally and whatnot. I mean, Lawton had so much value as a supporting piece. No matter you move him up and down the lineup, right? You can play him on the fourth line. You can play him in the middle six somewhere. You can move him to wing. You can move to center. He can play with a variety of different line mates. He's a Swiss Army knife type of a player, and he showed that again, I thought, in St. Louis. And I have to tell you that I thought Morgan Frost had an even better game than he had in Winnipeg, where I counted him creating 6 scoring chances in that game and created a ton of chances. Used his feet really, really well. Played with a lot of energy. That line with Tippett and connecting were knocking under all game long. The funny thing is when they finally did score was while TK and Frost got assists, it was really a solo effort by Tippett. Come on, it was kind of an unassisted goal, but it wasn't because there was no change of possession. Hit a linesman. Tippett grabs the puck, he goes and he scores. But that line was dominating all game long. They look great. I think Frost now has 5 points in his last 6 games. Ever since he kind of went into Torts' office and stuck up for himself a little bit, and one of the things with Torts is he actually likes that.
Yeah,
he actually likes when players push back a little bit. He'll keep pushing until somebody pushes back. So I think
the fieriness, right?
Yeah. And last year Morgan did ask for a meeting with Torts, but I had a sense, maybe because Morgan only sat 1 game last year, right? But I have a sense Torts did most of the talking. Frosty did a lot of nodding and kind of understood what do you need me doing better kind of thing. I think this time he stuck up for himself a little bit more and said, no, I disagree with you about that. And it actually became a productive dialogue. And again, I think he's pushed his game to that level that I think those who've watched him a long time know is there and just crave to see more consistency with that. So hopefully that can continue. So with Couturier out of the lineup, the way that the rest of the group stepped up, 4 different guys scored, 6 different guys contributed assists, good goaltending in both games. That's how you win those games. That's how you win those games when you're playing 3 times in 4 nights, when you're playing, in this case, 5 times in 8 nights. It was probably a good thing the Flyers had a second straight off day scheduled for Wednesday, and they'll go back at it on Thursday because I'm sure that's a pretty banged up and tired team, but you would never know it from watching the last few games. So I mean, just A+.
It says it's mental, right?
Yeah,
it's all the time. It's just mental. They're just convincing themselves.
He's going out there playing 20 minutes. So
yeah. Well, I want to touch on something real quick. Sorry, I loved what you said about Frost And the one thing I always felt was missing from Frost was never skill. And even when he had really good games, it's great. But what the key word I think used was assertiveness.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what Tortorella has been waiting for from him, is not, oh, is he skilled or any of that, or is he going to go out? Because like, it's not that we want him to go out and hit people or fight people. It's like, it's not that. It's having the confidence to be like, I'm an adult. I'm going to have an adult type of conversation, just like I'm on the rink, right? It's like young players get intimidated. And I think he was looking for that personality change because that's how he kind of drives, right? He's like a very combative person. And I think he was looking for that energy from Frost specifically. And I think once he probably showed him that, he's probably like, there's something more here. Because you have to convince Torts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not enough to convince us. You have to convince him. So I think you really nailed something there. Do you think that do you think that that's also going to spark now in his game? Because I feel like it kind of is. Like you see it in the way he's playing now to that point.
No, for sure. And I just, no, it's up to Morgan to just keep that going, just keep the confidence level high, keep the assertiveness level high, because it's, as you said, it's never been a matter of talent. Never. I mean, he's really, now you can see the people who said he's not a good skater, how ridiculous that looks. Because he's flying.
He's skating really well, especially the last game against St.
flying
Louis.
out there. Yeah. One thing that just to illustrate your point, I think you go back to when Mike Yeo was the head coach. This was his end of the season press conference, and remember the last 12 games of that season that Tippett and Frost played with Cates, and they were the Flyers' best line over those final dozen games. One thing that Mike said and stuck with me, he said, well, I think the next step and he said it's more Tip and Morgan than Noah, because he already sees that. And one thing he wants to see with Tippett and Frost is, again, back in 2022, he said, so we see the skill levels there. They can play at the NHL level. What I want to see next is, it's easy when things are going well for a team and things are flowing for players to kind of jump in and join in, and it's he'll go well for them too, trying to just going with the flow and following with what the team is doing. He said, I think the next step for Morgan and for Owen is, on those nights when nothing's going for the team, I want them to be the guy that can help turn things around, can have that big shift, make the big play, maybe whether there's a point or not, that can help spark a team. You can be the guy who takes control a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that, truthfully, I think when people keep bringing up how many of Frost's points last year were against non-playoff teams, I said that's fair, but 2/3 of Tip's goals were against non-playoff teams too.
That doesn't mean anything to me personally.
Yeah. So you play who you play, right? And and most guys are going to have better numbers against weaker defensive teams, non-playoff teams. So same thing in baseball, right? The top hitters, they abuse bad pitching, right? So that didn't matter much. But in terms of those games where you really need someone to step up, both guys lately have been doing that, where you need that big play, that a big play made, or a really quality shift, and creates a little spark in the next shift. The next line goes out and they do something. We're seeing at least hints of that, and again, hints have to become consistency. No one can do it every game, right? Everyone's going to have a bad shift, the occasional bad game. But I think there's a path as seeing that, okay, this is what he has to do going forward. So it's a hopeful sign. Has to continue.
Yeah, I definitely think for Frost, and you can see it now since the meeting with Tortorella, right? Like, there's been a change in his game. He's obviously played a lot better, a lot more assertive, as you've both stated. Really looks like he wants to dictate what's going on out there, and kind of wants to dictate the puck. So I think for him, it's just he's showing it, and the next prolonged step will be just consistency, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we see that you can do this, but how long can you do it? And if, like you said, if something goes bad on one given night, not letting that spiral and kind of getting back to the prior positive play. But for Frost, it really stands out is just like you see him almost calling for the puck at certain times. He more wants to dictate with the puck or wants to puck handle more. That's when, at least I've noticed over the past few years of watching Morgan Frost, is when he has the puck on his stick often and he is willing to puck handle. That's how you can tell it's a confident player. And I think since the meeting with Tortorella, you've seen that almost on a game-to-game basis where he really does and is looking for the puck more often, and even on the power play too. So I'm kind of interested to see where it goes with him and Drysdale as he returns to the lineup, because they showed some instant chemistry in that Montreal game, just kind of working as the quarterback and Frost off that left half wall. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch back on Noah Cates real quick, because you actually even answered one of the topics in there. The one thing that I would do want to add, though, is I think people have kind of underestimated how much this team has missed him. You brought up the roles, right? And I think that's kind of hidden Cates a little bit, right? Because you have Paling, you have Lawton, right? Where last year we didn't have Coots, right? It was a whole different thing. And Cates was so heavily relied upon to be that defensive guy, right? Now, I would also like to see him on the wing. I was thinking about that line as you were talking. The line of Cates, Frost, and Tippett, and how well Frost, Tippett, and TK did together. That might not stick with Couturier coming back.
Yeah.
He might end up moving back up, but maybe Noah Cates is a guy who might fit really nicely with those guys and get him kind of up in the lineup. You do have some young guys, a lot of balancing here. But do you think that Cates was more missed than people noted, than people really thought about? Because the team's been winning, right? So it's not so much of an issue of like, oh, they're doing terrible, they desperately need him back. But he's such a highly effective player that I think he does have a chance here to even kind of boost this team up defensively even further beyond to where they already got to.
No, I totally agree. And it's in terms of the 200-foot impact that he brings, whether he's scoring or not at a given time. One thing the Flyers were winning, but there was an underlying concern that I had, and I brought it out in several 5 things game previews. Like, geez, they're relying on one line for pretty much all the scoring here. If you're a one-line team, that's only going to work for so long. And thankfully, lately, everyone's contributing. The impact he had he had an instant impact on that fourth line, because I wasn't holding my breath for that line out on the ice. You really, in St. Louis, you could see some of what you missed, and his ability to play in. He can. The Flyers are still number 1 on the PK, so you can say they didn't miss them in that regard, but they did miss them in that regard. I just think situationally he does so many little things well. Where I think that it did show up a little bit is that the Flyers as a puck possession team. Remember, they got a really good start. They generally were out chancing teams early on. It kind of took a dip in December, and again, some of those games they were winning. So, but just in terms of it's so much easier to play with structure, turn defense into offense when you're not defending all game. And the Flyers are a better puck possession team, a better forechecking team. Said most especially when he's the F1, but even in the center is kind of a role. They're a better possession team when they have Noah Cates available. So just having him there means winning more 50-50 battles. Getting the puck out of the D zone the first try, rather than needing 3 or 4 because you turned it over. All those little things that might not make a difference in a particular situation, but can loom very large when it happens over and over and over again. I think they have that element back in the lineup, and that's really a positive.
Yeah. Well said. Anything to add on Cates, Vasili?
Yeah, I just think the forechecking ability is obviously something missed. I mean, the team and the Flyers, they're one of the best teams off the rush and in transition. And you've seen the coaching staff even mention that, they want them to get better and forecheck more often versus just look for those transition plays. I think Cates is a guy that will help you there because you can obviously see, how much of an effective forechecker he is when he is the F1. Who knows if, he's going to end up playing in that spot as a winger or a center. I mean, we're going to see as it kind of progresses here, but I think in general, just those little habits that he's so great at, he's kind of shown that, can help any team, right? So for the Flyers to get him back, really helpful in terms of that and penalty kill, as Bill mentioned as well.
Yeah. I'm excited for him. I love Noah Cates. All right, let's talk about one more player, then we'll get into some general Flyers stuff. Joel Farabee, he has obviously hit another level. I would say he's surpassed where he even got to in the past. Since I'll take a stat that Vasili gave me, since December 4th, he hasn't gone back-to-back games without putting up a point. So he's been consistent as well. He's third on the team in goals. He's right behind Tippett. And, I'm always been really high on him. I've been considering him a top line player in the waiting, in the mix. And I think he's been showing that. He's still not consistently on that, but I think it's more of just they want the depth throughout the lineup and the way they're making the lines. But Joel Farabee really has looked exceptional on certain nights. Still not getting, top minutes every night. But again, he's still young. He's younger than Frost and Tippett. So I think people easily forget that. But I expect his usage to go up as his time in Philadelphia grows. But what do you think about Joel Farabee and how he's evolved and what he's shown of late?
Well, I think you're seeing the real Joel Farabee. We it's been. Last year he wasn't himself. And it stands to reason, having had the neck surgery and having missed basically all the offseason, then jumping back in, playing all 82 games. It wasn't until really late in the year that he started looking like the Joel Farabee we saw before. Just his game in, game out consistency. He had the game against Jersey where he got benched for 58 minutes. Understandably wasn't happy about it. Just made sure he didn't just explode for a couple days. Just sat on it and processed it, and then put it aside. And hasn't skipped a beat since then. I think there's just so many things that he's done at 5-on-5. It's he's now on PP1. I don't know if he'll stay on PP1. We'll see. I guess it kind of based upon how the results go. But he is getting some increased power play time right now. I'd like to see him take advantage of that opportunity. I think what he's done really, really well this year, more so than I think at any other point in his career, is that he's getting to the scoring areas, right? He's getting himself to the net. So he's collected so many goals when pucks go loose in front, or finishing off in close, or following up his own chance, rather than sometimes he'd skate by the net as a little, as a younger player. And you can see that the next level of maturity in his game. And he's just been so consistent game in and game out that, when they pick the, most improved player award this year, to me, he's the runaway guy for that spot.
I didn't even think about that.
So
yeah, I think it definitely has to be Farabee if you're going for most improved, just in terms of last season and everything he's kind of gone through, right, with the surgery and where his game has progressed to at this point. I think the thing with Farabee that we've always seen in the past, right, is he's been able to score and shown that ability, but the consistency hasn't always been there, where he'd score for, let's say, 5 straight games he'd get points, and then for a 10-game stretch he'd have only maybe 1 or 2 points, or even pointless, right? But this season it's kind of the opposite of that. I believe the last 19 games he has 19 points. He has points in the last 3 games. A big thing obviously is the 5-on-5 production. Like he's doing it all right. Like in terms of his production with really minimal power play usage, just until recently, like you were saying, Bill, he hasn't really even been on the power play. Maybe some second usage minutes here and there, but nothing, considerable. And one stat that's really crazy is if you look at 5-on-5 point leaders this season, Farabee's right in the upper echelon with some of the best players in the league. So I'll go down the list here. Nathan McKinnon leads the NHL with 34 5-on-5 points. Nikita Kucherov is second with 31. Elias Pettersson has 30 in third, tied with Connor McDavid, who also has 30. And then Joel Farabee is right behind them with 29 points. And then Jake Gensel after Farabee with 29 and Zach Hyman with 29 as well. So just, seeing the company that he's in terms of 5-on-5 point leaders, I think that kind of speaks to the impact that he's having for the Flyers this season so far, right? He's producing at some of the highest rates of 5-on-5 across the league, just with some of the best players in the league. So that's something that, can't be understated. What's going to be really interesting for me, actually, when Couturier comes back here is, do they go back to that, Farabee, Couturier, Konechny line? Because as you were kind of saying with that line, despite the fact they're producing a lot, they're almost a one-line team. So I wonder if they try to maybe have Farabee on another line and then you split the production up. But Farabee's having a great season, and I just think for him it's just the consistent factor, right? The ability to find that consistency has kind of been something we haven't seen yet. So I just think the sky's the limit in terms of where it could go from here.
That's a good point, and I'm still very curious to see what would happen with Noah Cates in that position as well. Like with Couturier and TK, I think he would be a very good complementary player, and defensively they would be incredibly difficult to play against as a top line. So at least they would have that nailed down every night. All right, let's get into the next topic, and this is playoff chances. Everybody's talking about playoffs right now. The Flyers are in a playoff position. Again, the odds are in their favor, at least from a statistical standpoint. But I want to kind of compile these two questions into one thing. One, Bill, I'm just going to say, how do you think they'll do in the playoffs, assuming they make it? And I guess it depends on what position they're in. But the other thing is this has actually kind of driven me personally crazy. I've complained to Vasili about this quite a bit, but there's this perpetual statement about the Flyers don't have enough talent. Like, I'll tell you that Vasili and I projected them as at very least like a bubble playoff team to start this year. I had Jim Jackson on here. We were talking about it together. We never saw them at the bottom of the league. We didn't know they would do what they're doing specifically. I think they still exceeded our expectations, but we knew they were going to be at least like an 8th seed type of team, and a team that can play against the better teams in the league. I get that the Flyers don't have a top scorer, at least from a point production per game standpoint. And that's probably in Michkov, who will be over here, and we can talk about him too. But I don't really see a talent issue. I see a lack of maybe one high-end overall best producer in the league. But I think at this point, when you see what the Flyers are doing against competition, against really good teams, I think it's kind of time to kill that statement that there's a talent issue here. Maybe more, hey, you could add a game breaker, maybe 2 if you can find it. I'm sure everybody would love to do that. And maybe they don't have what, Colorado had when they won the Cup. That's a pretty rare thing. Same with Tampa Bay. But I don't think they necessarily have a talent issue. I mean, there's a bunch of former first-round picks here. Yeah. There are a bunch of really talented players, and we could go on top to bottom from this lineup, especially now with Drysdale here. You can even start doing that with the defense.
Yeah.
There's plenty of talent here to compete, and I don't know if they're going to go deep in a playoff run or anything, but I don't think we're looking at, hey, they made the playoffs, they got one round in them, and they're 100% out. Like, let's just be happy that they made it in. I think it's possible they can make it to the second round, maybe even make it to the Eastern Conference Finals if all things go well for them. Maybe, I don't see them as a cup team on paper. The way they play, I would say they do. But obviously they could use a couple more pieces to be that solidified Stanley Cup contender on paper. But what do you think about their playoff chances, and what do you think about this whole talent conversation that it's still being talked about right now, even though I thought it would kind of die out a little bit more?
No, well, first of all, I completely agree in terms of talent on the roster. There's a lot of guys who were first round picks, guys who played at the World Juniors towards or at the top of the lineup, right? You know, I have a hard time looking down this lineup, you know, and going, this guy has no role in the NHL. This guy's not an NHL player. You know, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, right? So I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but when I look at the lineup, there's not a Max Willman in there, right? There's not
Right.
there's not you know, Jerry Mayhew in there.
Right.
You know, everyone in the lineup is an NHL player. So I think that just in that regard, you know, you win a couple of ways. One of the ways you win is through depth.
Yeah.
And what they've actually shown with Couturier out of the lineup is they have depth. They have guys that can step up, you know, and deliver big performances when you don't have Couturier in the lineup for X amount of time. So I would hope that some of that would die out. The other piece of it too is that everybody loves offense, right? But still in the NHL will win is the teams with the lowest goals against averages, defense, structure, and particularly in the playoffs. That's what wins. You know, you hopefully have your special teams clicking during the playoffs, because a lot of games that one power play goal or the one opposing power play goal you give up can swing the whole game. So, you know, you hope that's clicking at the right time. You have to peak at the right time. Can't peak too early. I mean, all those things. And obviously injuries, long-term injuries can change the outlook in a hurry. I think the Flyers have the makings to be a team that a tough out in a playoff series. I'm not going to say 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever, but I think it's a playoff team, and I think it's a team that can give anybody in the East a tough series. That much I feel comfortable saying.
Exactly.
Yeah,
no,
I think.
I'm sorry. Please.
I was
Vasili.
just gonna say for the talent topic, Yariv, that you kind of brought forth. Like, if you look at the roster, they're having trouble fitting everybody into the lineup on a nightly basis. So that's just your one insight into, oh, you know, if there was a lack of talent, they'd be able to get everybody in every single night. But we're seeing, right, on various different nights, you know, that sometimes they have to scratch a certain guy because they can't fit in somebody else, right? And I don't think that happens on teams that, you know, have talent issues or have multiple guys that shouldn't be in the NHL in their lineup, as Bill kind of stated previously. And just for the playoffs, I mean, that was, I mean, greatly summarized, Bill, just in terms of the goals against and, you know, defensive prowess. If we look at the you know, Flyers' biggest strength this season, it's, you know, their play defensively and just their stinginess in their own end, right? This season, they're seventh in fewest goals allowed per games played this season. So that's a 2.68 rating for them. So if they could continue that type of play defensively and then continue to be the top or one of the top teams on the penalty kill in the playoffs, that'll go a long way, right?
Yeah.
So I think they have the chance to potentially upset any team like in a first round, just if they continue that type of play. You know, going beyond that, who knows? Another thing to couple into is the strong goaltending. If you factor in, you know, strong goaltending, strong defensive play, what are the, you know, two keys usually that lead to playoff wins, right? Is goaltending and strong defense. So if you just look at it that way, I think, I mean, they definitely have the opportunity to make the playoffs here. Obviously, the consistency has to continue. And I think that the health is the key. Like, if you have Sean Couturier out for any significant period, then things kind of change. So he's obviously going to have to re-enter the lineup here. But it bodes well, right? Like, if you look at Money Puck's percentage of playoff odds, I think the Flyers are at 69% right now. So it looks good. Obviously, things can change in such a tough division, but the way they're playing, right? If they can continue this every, 6 out of 10 type of games throughout a stretch, it probably bodes well that they'll find themselves in the playoffs here. So,
yeah. One thing I always say, Bill, on here is people love, you were talking about statistics. People love looking at the top of the statistics polls and be like, oh, we don't have as much talent as that team. And They have a top end scorer, but I always talk about you don't need the best player in the league to win a championship. You need players who can play against the best players in the league and not come out on the losing end. Like that, and that's how I saw. And don't get me wrong, Vegas has a lot of talent. But again, you wouldn't have looked at Jack Eichel during that season and said, "Oh, he's the best center in the NHL." But he could play against the best centers in the NHL. They had players who could play against them, and everything else kind of came around it. Again, on paper, the Flyers still lack that top scorer, right? And I believe they have that in Michkov, and I think that's the icing on the cake. And now you look at Drysdale, that's the other thing we were missing. That I don't think that they're that far away from being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender on paper.
Yeah, and when you look, the game itself changes, but some things don't change. And when you look at teams that are up near the top, and teams, one of my sentimental favorites, those Flyers teams in the mid '80s, right? And those are really the teams in my heart when I was growing up. Why were the Flyers a contender every year? Because they only had one Hall of Famer. Mark Howe was the only Hall of Famer on those teams, but they had the best record in the regular season. They did well against Edmonton most years, especially in the regular season. They were always right there. Why did they do that? Well, because even though the Flyers had some stars, but not Hall of Fame kind of stars, the Flyers had more good players than many other teams, right? They might have as many great guys, but they had more good players up and down the lineup who understood their role, who were a fit for what you were trying to do. And even as styles change and eras change, that has not changed. And one of the things that I think the Flyers have been systematic at doing, and still work to do, but one thing they've been systematic at doing is trying to get players who fit each of the specific needs that you have for what you're trying to accomplish.
About roles.
Yeah, it's all about roles and who fits them and how the pieces fit together. When you look at how a line works, to me, and ideally everyone in the line can do more than one thing, right? But to me, you need that F1 who gets in forechecks and wins battles. You need a distributor, playmaker, and you need a shooter, right? And maybe there's some weaknesses in there. One guy can cover a little for the other. Maybe one guy can do multiple things. There's your star players, your superstars can do multiple things. But the Flyers are evolving a roster where pieces fit together, where it's more than the sum of the parts. Really, a lot of the teams that kind of stay there for a while can do that. Where you look at the individual pieces and you go, well, there's more talented teams in terms of individuals, but then maybe they aren't better teams. Maybe the pieces don't fit together as well.
Yeah, how's the cohesiveness and the depth, right? That's always a big factor. So
there were Rangers teams like that in the past where they just had so much talent, but they wouldn't, they would never even make noise in the playoffs.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So let me do a quick subscribe reminder. Please, everybody, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. Again, it's a humongous help to us just to support us. We're gonna do 2 more topics here, and then we'll call it a podcast. So the last one, we'll kind of put these topics together, but recently the Flyers, or at least it's been rumored that the Flyers, and Danny Briere did kind of hint this in an interview where he said that he was hoping that Nick Seeler would be here for the rest of his career. I think they love Nick Seeler, and honestly, what is there not to love? He's vastly exceeded everybody's expectations, and when people talked about trading him, I would get nervous because I was like, I don't really know. I was like, because that return probably won't be as good as what he is to us as a team, and we need what he brings. The physicality, the size is definitely matters in the NHL, and if we're going to move somebody like Risto potentially, he becomes even more important. And he's very contract. His contract is great. That doesn't hurt any team in the league. So just taking that in mind, it's still a little bit early. We tell our audience here, really wait till end of February if you really want clarity on a trade deadline. You're not going to really know, because if the Flyers are in the playoffs, odds are they're not going to be rushing to move guys out of town. But now with Drysdale here, things might change a little bit, especially with the D. Where somebody like Sean Walker, maybe you would keep him for a playoff run, maybe not as much now. But want your thoughts there, Bill. How do you think the Flyers are going to approach the trade deadline, especially with that little bit of news in Nick Seeler?
First of all, I completely agree. I think that because not only do you look at what asset comes back, you also look at replacement cost, right? If you're going to be even if just theoretically, you were to lose them as an unrestricted free agent this summer, I don't think it'll come to that. I think if he's not dealt at the deadline because somebody gives him a great offer, I think he'll be re-signed. And in fact, if I had to put money one way or the other, I think Nick Seeler will be ultimately re-signed. A little bit like Scott Lawton a couple of years ago, because remember he actually signed his extension on trade deadline day, and so I wouldn't be shocked if it kind of plays out a little bit like that. I do think that the Drysdale acquisition has made it less likely that Walker is extended, and he's done really well. He's come in and he's done well, but you still want to allow some room for young players to break in the lineup and whatnot. Now but you also have to weigh that against the offer. Sometimes if you lose somebody as a free agent, well, what were you going to get? Sometimes sometimes it's almost worth losing the guy as a free agent if you can't replace that at the deadline. Like I'm not really interested in a conditional, even second round pick, for example, right? Now, if you're talking about 2 second-round picks and they're guaranteed, and it's not, we have to get to the conference finals and he has to play X number of games, otherwise it's a third-round pick. The heck with that. No, I'd rather hang on to him for the rest of the season if that's the case. Flyers are in an enviable position that they haven't been in a while, where they don't have to deal out of weakness. They can deal from strength. Other teams want what they have. Flyers are not up against the cap. They're not with the cap going up probably significantly. They can re-sign guys that they want to sign. Ask for the pieces they want to ask for. They could even take on a bad salary for an extra year or whatever, and increase the return if they do move somebody, or they don't have to move somebody. And so that it gives them a whole lot of flexibility they haven't had in a while. So that's really kind of how I see the deadline as a whole.
I love that. Yeah, I think the defense and just the fact that they have so many NHL-ready defensemen on their roster right now, with the 8, it's just a position of strength, like you were saying, Bill, they'll be able to deal with. Like, what are most teams looking for at the NHL trade deadline is defensemen. So the Flyers will, be able to capitalize there if they do decide to, move a Walker, move a Seeler. I think with Drysdale being acquired, moving Seeler makes a lot more sense because there's almost a redundancy factor in terms of skill set, right? Like, all those things that Walker does really well, Drysdale can do, and he's a lot younger, and you're going to be looking to develop him. So it almost, is like he's kind of your Walker replacement.
You mean moving Walker? You said moving Seeler. I just want to.
Yeah, moving Walker. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. So I think it's like a Walker replacement essentially with Drysdale, right? And then for Seeler, it's really interesting because he brings a lot of intangibles that this team essentially would be lacking if you were to move on from him. Like just the shot blocking, the physicality. They still have a Ristolainen, but that's essentially only one guy that brings that type of physical nature. I mean, Stahl as well. I think Stahl probably would potentially get moved if they're suitors, but who really knows there as kind of like a number 7 and limited time, limited action. But for Seeler, I think the interesting thing is, let's say you do re-sign him. I mean, he's making $775,000 right now. If you re-sign him, I can't imagine it's going to be, a huge raise. Like probably you're going between, 1.7 million to maybe a 2.25 or a 2.5 maximum. So with the cap going up, let's say you do re-sign him and some of your younger guys end up outplaying him down the line, moving a contract like that with the things that he will do, because you can't imagine it's going to be very long term. I think the Flyers would be able to definitely move him down the line, even if they did re-sign him. A lot of teams would be interested. And then just a caveat too, I think people, and if you look at Sealer, like you hear Elliot Friedman saying, "Oh, they really want to resign him." Even Briere, states on Missing Curfew that they'd love to keep him, but it could also just be like a bit of a ploy from the Flyers in the sense that, of course, we love this guy, like we really want to keep him. We love to resign him, and if you want him, you're going to have to overpay for him, right? So I think that could be a bit of it too, where you kind of put that out there and hope if somebody does want him, that they overpay for him. And then you're kind of dealing from even more of a position of strength, because if they don't overpay, you can re-sign him because you really like him. So it's really, I think, a win-win scenario for the Flyers, whether they trade him. It could be at an overvalued asset that they get in return. And if they re-sign him, they keep a player they really like. So,
yeah. I think it's well said. Anything you wanted to add there, Bill? Otherwise, we'll move to the last topic.
No, I thought really, really well said. All I'll add is that in terms of Stahl, I think it'll be up to Mark.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's not even about the asset that comes back,
right?
It's
about
just
what he wants.
About what he wants, doing right by him,
doing him a favor.
To take another, another kick at the can with the cup. Remember he played in the Cup Finals last year, and he played in every game of the regular season and playoffs. So if he wants to give it one more shot, even if you're getting a late round pick, which is probably all you're going to get, they would do that for him. If he wants to stay here, he'll stay here.
Yeah, I think normally though, and again, this is why I caveat, it depends where we are. And if the Flyers finish second in the division, I'm just saying, right where they are right now, how do you justify moving players out where most teams try to be 8 defensemen deep going into the playoffs? Right. So and he might believe that the Flyers can make a run. So
there's definitely a wait and see, I think, just based on their position, right?
Yes.
Like depending where they are.
But like Bill nailed it. It's a great position to be in. And it's because of the work that the leadership has done to keep us in this position. And it shows how patience is it's a virtue for a reason. All right, let's end on this last topic. Typically we end with like a prospect Phantoms update, but we've gone long so far, so I'm just going to keep it to one young player, a guy that's been on everybody's list so far. He's having an exceptional rookie year with the Phantoms. You can already predict who I'm talking about. Samu Tuomala, near a point per game. He's putting up points. If it's not every night, it's every other night. He's the all-star representative for the Phantoms. An exceptional skater. I think Charlie O'Connor said that maybe his comparables like a Carl Hagelin. I thought that was actually pretty fair. I don't know if he's got the same, straightaway speed, but he's an excellent skater. And he seems to have a lot of offensive tools and has completely rebounded over the past, 18 months off of where we thought he was, and now looks to really justify the position in which he was picked. I'm very excited about it. I haven't had too much time watching. Mostly it's just been highlights, and I've watched a couple games here and there. But Bill, I know you do follow the Phantom, so I'd love to get an update on Sammy Tuomala, and we'll end it on that one.
His two-way game has grown a lot. Actually, probably the best back-checking play I've seen in the organization this year was on a 3-on-3 where I thought Tuomala was hopelessly caught up ice. This was in overtime. Joe Snively of Hershey had a breakaway, and I thought there was no chance of Tuomala catching him, and he did. I mean, he closed the gap with a blink of an eye, lifted the stick, play over. Now, Hershey ended up winning that game in overtime, so that kind of gets forgotten about. But wow, that was one heck of a play. So that stands out. He's always had the speed. He's rediscovered his shot. I mean, when he dominated the under-18 Worlds, he was shooting the lights out, and along the way somewhere he stopped shooting. He lost confidence in his shot. He's scoring a lot from the flanks. I mean, his one-timer, it's back, and he's scoring a lot of goals that way. Setting up plays too. Still gets out muscled at times. Still has games where you don't notice him when like you'd like to notice him. But on the whole, his body of work has been really, really good. Hope he keeps building off of it. There were guys in the Phantoms that I thought really were on the brink a year ago. For example, Benoit being a player, I thought, okay, he's going to challenge for an NHL spot this year, and he's taken a step backwards. Yeah. So it's a process of continually proving yourself and showing you're ready. But he's close. He looks really good.
That's awesome. And let me ask one more caveat here. Did the Phantoms' performance concern you at all? Just the up and down nature of their win cycle? I was surprised.
There's been a piece of that. I think they've been pretty inconsistent. Honestly, the biggest disappointment to me has been the goaltending. I don't think that either Cal Peterson or Felix Sandstrom has been nearly consistent enough. I think it's cost them points a number of times this year. Both played well this past weekend, by the way.
Okay.
So I was hoping goaltending would be a strength there, and it really kind of hasn't been. So if the goaltending isn't there, particularly in a tightly packed division, it can hurt you. Phantoms are kind of on the bubble. I mean, you got to be in the top 6 in the division to get in the playoffs. I think they're certainly capable of doing that, but they need more consistency as a team, no doubt.
Fair enough. All right, Vasili, anything you want to add before we tie up here? Okay, awesome. Bill, anything you want to add? Anything you want to tell people about? You got an article coming out? Anything? Not that people don't see your stuff, but
the biggest thing next Friday is the Flyers alumni game. So check out all the stuff on the Flyers website, PhiladelphiaFlyers.net. We have a whole big stuff, plan counting down to the alumni game next week. We have a fan poll as to I'm not going to put who. Unfortunately, Brent Fedek is unable to play, so we can't reunite the Crazy Eights like we hope to. Well, we have a pretty good substitute. We're reuniting the Legion of Doom instead. So John Leclerc. John Leclerc
was a close second there, Bill. But.
Yeah. So we have a reader. We have a fan poll for tomorrow. I think it expires tomorrow. Who will play with Mike Richards and with Mike Knuble? So Scott Hartnell is a choice. Brian Propp is a choice. So put in your vote on that. We are going to do it. Whoever the fans vote in as their starters for the alumni. Everyone likes to be the coach and pick the lineup. You can. Here's your chance.
That's really cool.
We'll do other positions too.
Yeah, I love that. I wasn't aware of that. That's actually a great idea. I know who my vote would be. All right. Okay, thank you, Bill. Again, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was a great episode. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Always a pleasure, guys.
All right, thank you. And again, just remind everybody, please like, subscribe, share, do the whole thing. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, and again, a shout out to our sponsors, Summit Public Adjusters and Steve Steaks and 4th and South. Make sure to check them out. And remember, we love you guys, and always stay green.